Hello guys, and welcome to a new Wargame Red Dragon video today by me, Vulcan. Today I have for you an early look at the new South African DLC for Wargame Red Dragon. What I'm going to be doing today is going through the South African deck and showing you guys all of the units that will be available to it. But please bear in mind that this is a closed beta build, and therefore a lot is subject to change. There's a lot of balancing still to do, and there's still some work in progress logos. So big thanks to Eugen for giving me access so that I can show you guys this early on. So let's jump on in. We'll create a new deck here. Now we'll build a couple of decks just to show you guys the sort of decks that can be built from the South African DLC. But today what we're going to do is go through all of the individual units that you will find in the South African DLC. So first of all, we have the Alouette 3. This is a 210 km/h command helicopter. Then you've got the Commandant, which is your standard 5-man command. And with these come all of the different transports that you're going to see throughout the deck. So I'll go through them now. First of all, you've got the Samuel 50, which is your standard 50 km/h off-road speed and 150 km/h on-road speed truck. Then there is the Buffel, which is one of the new transports. This comes with a twin M1919, which has 90 km/h off-road speed and 150 km/h on-road speed. It is armoured, but it lacks top armour. The Caspian Mark II is another option. This also has a twin machine gun, but this has top armour, unlike the Buffel. Slightly less autonomy though. Then there's the Caspian K-Car, which is the same vehicle, but it has a 20mm. But this HS-404 is actually pretty fast firing and can do a lot of damage to infantry in the open, for sure. So definitely a decent choice. Then there is the Ratel 20, which has a slightly better 20mm. It has 20% accuracy as opposed to 15% accuracy, and has a similar rate of fire. As you can see, the 749 round per minute. Very nice indeed. You get the extra front armor, and you also get extra off-road speed. So this is 105 km/h. Very nice APC. Then we have the Ratel 20 Milan, which is pretty much exactly the same, except it has a Milan F1 mounted on it with the 17 AP power and the 2,450 meter range. Then there is the Ratel 60, which comes with a mortar launcher equipped to it. It has 60mm heat rounds, which aren't particularly great with the 4 AP power, but it does have the ability to provide smoke. So I think this is actually a really nice infantry support vehicle to have your infantry come in, because you can drop them off, you can smoke in front of your own infantry and cover them with the mortar fire as you approach. You get 42 60mm mortar rounds, which only have 2 HE, mind you, but can definitely help pin things down and panic them so they do less damage to you. Then there's the Ratel 90. This has a 90mm gun with heat rounds, 8 AP and 3 HE. So the heat means that they do at least 1 damage every hit. But the 2 front armor and 105 speed is exactly the same. And then you got your 2 helicopter choices, the first being the Puma 330H, which has 250 km/h speed and 6 strength. And then the Oryx gets the 8 strength and 300 km/h speed. Basically sort of a variant of the Puma that was sort of redesigned in South Africa, I believe. So a little bit of a better, safer option, but does cost you the extra 5 points. Moving on, we have the Oliphant BV, and the Oliphants are all built off the Centurion, or at least they were designed based on the Centurion. They are actually their own tank, but they look very similar to Centurions. And in this case, we've got the Oliphant BV. It's your CV vehicle. It has 2,100 meter range, 35% accuracy, 10% stabilizer, and 9 front armor with the 2 top armor. That's what you want out of like your CV tanks, is that extra top armor. It means they take a lot less damage from bombs and stuff. Then you've got the Ratel BV, which is a 50 cal variant of the Rattel. 2 front armor, 1 top armor. Very speedy boy with the 105 km/h off-road speed. Then you have the Rover BV. This is your standard like truck. It comes with 95 km/h speed, so it's pretty zoomy off-road. The Buffalo BV, slightly slower, but does have armor, 90 km/h speed. And then you have the Caspia BV, which has 90 km/h, but with the 1 top armor. So I think the Rattel is probably the best bet for CV, unless you want to go that little bit further and get the extra top armor. But then again, like the Rover BV is fine and nice and cheap. Then we have the FOB, of course, the Super Frelon, which is a 3,700 supply helicopter with 275 km/h speed. Pretty standard stuff for a large cargo helicopter. You got to remember that these can be used as like forward staging FOBs. If you land one of these near the front line, what you can do is drive up your ground supply vehicles next to them, and the ground supply vehicles will fill from your helicopter. So that's what you'd use something like this for. Then there's the SAML 50 cargos. These have 500 litre supply and 50 km/h speed. The SAML 100 has 100 km/h speed off-road with the 2,400 supply. So this does cost 4 times as much, but it does move a lot quicker off-road, which is quite nice in some cases. But generally, I would say, because all of your other units move very fast, it's not terribly important. What you'd probably do is have your standard cargo trucks drive up the road and then drive your other units to the cargo, as opposed to the other way around, because you'd probably back off from the front line, unless you need them on the front line, in which case having this cargo truck would probably be better, because then it can move into cover quite quickly. Let's move on to the infantry tab. So first unit in the infantry tab is the B10 Unitar. It has 5 men with a 1,400 meter recoilless rifle, which has 2 HE and 12 AP. It's actually quite a long range recoilless. I think it matches or even beats the Tanker Shasha. But you can bring these in the Buffalo, Caspia and Caspia K-Car. Again, all of these transports are pretty much exactly the same as the ones that I showed you guys in the command tab or in the logistics tab. Then you have your Bokop. Bokop have 10-man squads, regular training. They have a Vector R1 and a Bren L4, 40% accurate, 10% stabilizer on their main gun, with a 20% accurate MG with 450 round per minute. They're an okay standard infantry squad, and you can get them in the Buffalo for 20 points a pop. Now, one thing that you will lack in this deck, in the South African deck, is cheap transports. There's no decent 5-point transports like there are in, say, Israel. But in this case, 10 points plus the 10-point transport, which is armored, is not too bad. And you can bring them in the Caspia Mark II as well, which is slightly better with that extra top armor. So, yeah, basically, your pretty simple regular infantry choice. And bring them in the K-Cars and the Rattel 20s, the Rattel 20 Milan, the Rattel 60, the Rattel 90, and the 2 helicopter choices there. The Rattel 20 is actually a really nice combination with these to get some cheap APCs with your cheap infantry. Now, the upgrade from the Bokop to the Bokop 90 is mainly the change of guns across the board, actually. They have Vector R4s instead of the Vector R1, which gives them slightly more stabilizer, better for closer range engagements, with a little bit extra rate of fire. They do get the FT5, which is a unique launcher to the South Africans. 700 meter range, 60% accurate, 23 AP power. But what lets it down is the 10 round per minute rate of fire. So as opposed to the Apalas, which has 20 round per minute rate of fire. That's quite a big difference. Then you got the FN mag, which is, I think, just slightly worse in terms of rate of fire. So yeah, I'm not too convinced the Bokop 90 are that good. I think they are just sort of decent AT for when you want to have something next to your normal Bokops, although, their AT is kind of a bit meh. But moving on, we have the Buffaloes. Now, these are 15-point shock squads. The 25-point variant has G3A2s, an RPG-7, which only has 40% accuracy and 14 AP power with 10 round per minute rate of fire. So pretty terrible AT weapon. But then they have the CQC HK21, which is a pretty good machine gun with the 20% stabilizer there and a 40% accuracy at range. So they're okay, but the Buffaloes 85 are a pretty damn cool squad. They are a 15-point shock squad with an AKM and an RPD. The RPD is not as good as the machine gun you get with the standard Buffaloes, but you get a Milan F1, and having a 15-point Milan squad, or 15-man, sorry, Milan squad with shock training is actually pretty nice. So not a terrible option. They are very similar to like Gornos, except Gornos have regular training and they can only be brought in helicopters, whereas these can be brought in your standard like Caspier K cars and Caspier Mark IIs. So yeah, definitely a decent unit to check out. Next up we have the Burger Mag. These are your 5-point militia squads, but they have 15 men. So a little bit more than usual. I think normal militia squads only have like 10-man squads. I might be wrong. But either way, they have Vector R1s with the 30% accuracy. And then the Super Bazooka there, which is obviously a pretty trash tier AT, but that's what you'd expect for the 5 points. But you could definitely bring these in en masse with something like the Buffalo or the Caspier, and they'd probably be a little bit of a nuisance for a while. Next up, we have the Inflict. These are a quite unique unit. They have the RO-107, which is a anti-infantry launcher. It has 1,925 meter range with 4 HE power, which is actually very, very powerful against infantry at range. So 7 round per minute rate of fire, 4 HE, you're going to be chunking infantry squads at range quite nicely. And I believe they also have a little bit of splash, so they do kind of affect the squads around them. So definitely worth checking out. Good on the defense, pretty niche though. Next we have the Mech Inf, so your mechanized infantry. The standard Mech Inf have Vector R1s and FN mags with the LRAC F1, so very French loadout there with the French launcher. Shock trained with 10 strength for 20 points isn't terrible. The Mech Inf 90 though, they have the upgraded launcher and a better better weapons, so they get the Vector R5, which has 45% accuracy and 30% stabilizer with a bit better rate of fire, so decent close range option. They get the FT5 launcher that we've seen before with the 23 AP power and 60% accuracy, and then they get the SS77, which is a new machine gun. Not like an amazing machine gun, but it's okay, and does have the 15% stabilizer. And these can be brought in all of the ground transports, but not the air transports. Then we have the Milan squads. Milan squads are pretty simple. 2-man squads with a Milan F1. Milan F1s are going to be the best infantry A to GM that you're going to get your hands on. Next we have the Parabat. The Parabat have Vector R2s, RPG-7s and FN mags. These are an okay squad for 15 points. If you compare them to like the Mech Inf for 20 points, you actually get a pretty interesting unit that's like a bit better at like close range engagements for cheaper price. The Mech Inf obviously get that better AT weapon, which is quite nice. But I would say these Parabat are good for trading into infantry on the cheap. And then we've got the Parabat 90, which have the upgraded weapons. They've got the Vector R5 again and the Mini SS. The Mini SS is equivalent to the best MG in the game, so that's pretty good. And then you've got the Vector R5, which is okay at close range, and then you've got the FT5, which is not a terrible launcher, but obviously the rate of fire would be nice if it was upgraded. But yeah, a very, very solid squad, the Parabat 90. There is a card of Sappers that you can bring. There's 2 cards of these. They have the Napalm that they can use, 10-man squads, very similar to other Flamer squads available. You got the SASF. These guys are your special forces, 25-point variant. These guys have the Vector R5, pretty good for annihilating enemy infantry with their elite training. And then they've got the LRAC F1 and the Strela 2M. The LRAC is not great, 19 AP power, 10 round per minute rate of fire. And you've got the Strela 2M, which is a pretty lackluster AA, especially since you're going to be up against Red 4 a lot of the time. 3 HE is not that fantastic. And we got the SAF 90. Now this is when these get a lot better. They get the same main gun, so they've got the Vector R5s again, but they now have Apelles and Stingers. So the Apelles has 50% accuracy, 23 AP power, but 20 round per minute rate of fire, which is actually very significant. And then you've got a Stinger, which has 5 HE power. So you're always going to two-shot things with these SASF. They do have quite a long reload time on the Stinger, but with the 50% accuracy, you're going to be hitting and taking down helicopters at least. Aircraft, you might be able to shoot down an aircraft if it's like already been hit by something else. But the nice thing about the SASF is they do have, like, you can get 10 of them, which is quite a lot. Like the South African nation as a whole, when you bring in them as a deck on the by themselves, they get plus 20% availability. So you'll see that the availability in general is actually quite generous across all of these units. Like even the Buffalo 85s, you get 12 of them. The Mech Inf, you're on 12. The Mech Inf 90 on 12. And that's hardened, and that's with the Ratel 20s. So like the Ratels do lower your availability slightly. The Caspiers put them at 14. So yeah, very generous availability across the board. Moving on, there is Stinger squads. These are your standard 2-man Stinger squads. Again, long reload time. And then you got the Strela 2 and the Strela 3. And these are, I don't know if you'd ever really want to use these. They're okay, but they're not, fantastic. It might be quite interesting to maybe use these to bring in a lot of transports. So if you were to put the Strela 2s, for example, into the Ratel 20s and then use it to spam out Ratel 20s, that might be a way to do things, and then you've just got a load of AA everywhere. But otherwise, yeah, I'm not convinced. It's like it kind of reminds me of using blowpipes with Lynxes, like Lynx AH7s. That always used to be a thing. Whereas, like now, obviously, you got like the Strela 2s with a Ratel 20, which you could definitely throw a lot of at the enemy. Moving on to the support tab. So we got the Cactus here. This is a 60% accurate non-radar unit. It's using the Crotal system, basically a Crotal, with the 6% accuracy, 3,325 meters against helicopters. So pretty good anti-helicopter AA, 2,625 meters against airplanes. And then we got the Cactus SAHV. This is a prototype for the South Africans, which has 65% accuracy and 3,500 meters range against helicopters, which makes it equal or better to the best like ground versus helicopters in the game, I believe, in terms of range. You do get your 4 infrared missiles. The amount of missiles you get is kind of low. I would like 1 reload with these, honestly, because kind of you have to have supply with them to really make good use out of them. But yeah, they are good. That's for sure. 3,500 meters, you're going to take down those helicopters in no time. Obviously, airplanes, maybe not so much. But you do have the Ruacat ZA HVM, which is another prototype vehicle for the South Africans. And this is the first, I believe, we've seen of the Ruacat hull. So, first of all, you've got a radar missile, 3,500 meter range, 4,200 meters versus airplanes. 65% accuracy is very nice, especially considering you can bring them in hardened, which will then give you the plus 16% accuracy, well, plus 16% of 65% accuracy, to boost that up a bit. So very, very accurate. strong against airplanes and helicopters, but it does have 120 kilometer per hour off-road speed. That's off-road speed. So that's super, super fast. It has some armor. So very, very nice AA vehicle. Good for chasing down helicopters even. And getting in position quickly for aircraft. You do have to manage the radar. Obviously turning them off so that you don't get hit by seed. Next up we have the Eland 60, which is basically the AML 60 that you can get with the French. It's a little mortar carrier that can blast out a little bit of smoke as well. Very short range though. Then you got the Ratel 81, which is the Ratel hull with an 81mm mortar in it. 2,730 dispersion, 4,900 meter range. Pretty standard stuff. 3 HE power for these, and then you got the Ratel 120, which has 5 HE power, but of course the lower ammo count. The difference in ammo count between an 81 and a 120 is pretty big. So if you're going to use a 120, make sure you have your supply nearby. This is also prototype, the 120 version. Next up we have the Rover 107. This is a very interesting little vehicle. It's a rover with a napalm launcher strapped on the back of it. So it has 1,750 meter range, but it only has 16 rounds. I think like at closer ranges, you could probably use this to napalm out specific compounds. So where there are maps where there is like a couple buildings next to each other and they're like holding like a bridge or something, you could use these to kind of push infantry out of them. But it's such a niche use that I don't really think we're going to see much use out of them. Their availability is low. They probably suck up supply quite badly. So yeah, it's a funny unit though. Then we have the Valkyrie. This is your pretty standard HE launcher, 7 HE power, 2,000 or 24,500 meter range, 4,550 dispersion. Yeah, pretty standard stuff. Very similar to some of the other HE power rocket units that are available in other nations. 127mm rounds. It's a cool looking car though, with that sort of deflector on the front. And then there's the Batailleur, which is a big old truck with a cluster munition launcher on the back of it. So this has 3 AP power. It's going to be, pretty naff. You'd have to have a lot of time on target to kill something. And I feel like by the time that enough rounds land, the thing that you're firing at is probably going to have moved. But I think in some cases, this could be used to like dislodge positions where your enemy might be dug in with like a bunch of heavy tanks or something. Maybe it's just like maybe a load of AA or something. You could probably try and catch something out with these AP rockets. Then we have the Sexton. This has 3 front armor, 2 side armor, 1 back armor, no top armor. But it is quite a tanky boy in the front, but yeah, it's a Sexton. Bit outdated at this point. 1,000 or 12,250 meter range with 4 HE power. Now the 4 HE power isn't like terrible, but it's obviously not great. Now, the funniest thing about the Sextons though is you can actually bring 20 of them, and I'd be quite interested to see how effective they are if you manage to get that many on the field. Next up though we have the Rhino. This is a very speedy long gun. Apparently it's one of the most accurate, if not the most accurate, long-range artillery in the game. So it comes with 36 rounds, which is actually quite generous, 7 HE power, and the dispersion is only 2,730 meters with a range of 39,900 meters. So basically what you can do is sit back with a couple of these near your base, fire off a couple rounds, and then move, and then target something else and fire in a couple rounds, because what you're going to be targeting with this kind of thing is like AA or enemy mortars or something like that. And all you're going to really need with 7 HE power is a couple shots to land on target and you'll get the kill. So it's a pretty nice artillery piece, that's for sure. Doesn't quite have the best firing pattern. It's quite kind of like standard, like boom, 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 as opposed to like something like a BCAM, which is like really fast. But it's still very, very powerful artillery weapon. Then we have the Justerwerk. This is a 20mm AA. It does have a stabilizer, which means it can fire on the move. And since it can fire against ground and like helicopters, like I feel like this is not like the worst AA piece in the world, and it's on quite a speedy hull. So I'd reckon these could see use if you had extra spaces in the support tab. Then you got the Buswerk, which is basically a truck similar, but with the ZSU on it instead. And the ZSU doesn't have a stabilizer, so I wouldn't say this is as good, especially since it lacks range against ground as well. I think the 20mm is definitely a better option. And then we have the Ruhrkat ZA35. Now this has the M35 weapon system, which is a twin 35mm radar spag, which basically has a 2,800 meter range against helicopters, 2,625 meter range against airplanes. Now it's actually not that far. The range on these is very limited, so I wouldn't be relying on them too much, but they are nice for stunning incoming aircraft and definitely shooting down helicopters quickly once they get in range. 55% accuracy is decent, and it does have a stabilizer, so it can fire on the move. And at 120 km/h speed, it makes complementing your other Ruhrkats quite nice, because you can kind of cover them as they drive up the road at that speed, or even off-road for that matter. So again, 120 km/h speed on these Ruhrkats. This one in particular, though, is a prototype. Let's move on to the tank tab. We got here the Wargame. This is the biggest tank that you're going to see that the South Africans have. Like, tracked vehicles in South Africa are quite rare to come by. But in this case, we got the Wargame, 70% accurate, 23 AP power main gun with 8 round per minute rate of fire. Now the rate of fire is a bit lackluster, but it definitely packs a punch at the 2,275 meter range. It doesn't have as good armor as some other tanks, super heavy tanks, and it doesn't really have any other like utility, like no HGM, like maybe like the 280 T80U does, for example. But yeah, it's just a standard long range super heavy. Nothing crazy about it. Then there's the Oliphant Mark 1. So again, based off the Centurion hull, and this has 35% accuracy, 10% stabilizer, 11 AP, 3 HE, a 2,100 meter range. For 30 points, it's okay-ish, but I feel like you're going to struggle with low autonomy and slow off-road speed. So, it's going to have limited use. And there's the Oliphant Mark 1A, which is basically has the same problems of speed and autonomy, but does have the 2,275 meter range with 45% accuracy. So a bit of a better gun there, and a little bit extra AP power to boot. Then there's the Oliphant Mark 1B. This has a 60% accurate 2,275 meter range gun with 16 AP power and 10 round per minute rate of fire. Now, I believe this is actually, a relatively decent tank for the 60 points. It does not have as good sort of armor as some other medium tanks for the same price, but its gun is pretty good with that accuracy and that AP power. Then you got the Oliphant Mark 1B Optimum. It's funny how like the Oliphants are just basically like, oh, let's add more and more stuff onto them and just make the Centurion hull fatter as we go. But we got the Optimum one here, which is basically a slightly better gun, only 1 more AP power, but it has some seriously better frontal armor. And it does have better optics as well. So you get 15 front armor as opposed to 11. And that makes it able to trade quite well for its price tier, as long as you're not getting side shot. Because the side armor on this, you can just kind of see for yourself, it's a complete block. So 6 side armor only does make this go down pretty fast if it gets hit in the side armor. But now for the fun part of the tank tab for South Africa, and that is the Ruhrkats. So these are very, very speedy boys with very scary guns. They're basically Vickers Mark 5s on steroids. I think that's in Vickers Mark V, the one with the Commonwealth where they can go really fast and have a big gun. But anyway, the Ruhrkat 76 Mark 1C has a gun that has 2,100 meter range with 65% accuracy, 60% stabilizer, 60% accurate on the move, with 12 AP power, 2 HE, and 7 round per minute rate of fire. Now, the rate of fire is not that great, but going that speed, 120 km per hour off-road, or 150 km per hour on-road, is actually very scary, especially being able to maintain that accuracy at that speed. So these can pick off units left, right, and center very, very quickly. They're very good for cleaning up the backline. Anything with low armor, like transports and stuff, very quick at taking them out. And then with the speed, you can potentially get your flank on and go for heavier tanks. Now, there is a 105mm version as well. This has a much bigger gun with 17 AP power. It's got the 2,275 meter range, maintains that 60% accuracy stabilizer with the 3 HE power gun and extra rate of fire as well. So these are incredible. For the 10-point upgrade, this is massive. Now, this could, of course, change the 50 points here. I feel like it might. But yeah, for 120 kilometer per hour speed, very, very good unit. They are a prototype, though, so maybe that won't change. But either way, very, very good unit indeed. Now we have the Recce tab, or the Recon tab. First of all, we got the Alouette. So the standard Alouette, 210 kilometer per hour speed, same as the Command variant, just obviously cheaper because it's just a recon. Then there's the Eland with the LN90. This is again the AML hull. This time put with a 90mm gun on top of it. Only 8 AP power, 3 HE, 7 rounds per minute rate of fire. 95 km per hour off-road speed though, maintaining the speed. Then you got the variant, which is pretty much the same, just with the NTAC M-class missiles on them. Then we've got the Ruhrkat 76, which is the same as the 76 in the tank tab, except it now has optics. So this is actually a very, very good tank for flanking because it maintains that 120 km per hour off-road speed, and zooming around the edge of the map and picking off AA and stuff from behind is very, very nice indeed. Picking off enemy artillery or picking off enemy transports coming down roads or enemy CVs for that matter. Very, very nice unit for scouting around and finding targets to shoot, either with its own gun or maybe with your aircraft or something like that. Then there's the Para Pathfinders. These guys are very good indeed. Very similar to Formosa in that they have a 40mm frag grenade launcher. So very, very good at close range. With shock training, they can absolutely mince up their enemies. And when they're firing at longer range, they do have the HK-21, which is a very good machine gun as well. So, yep, you're firing away at longer range with your machine gun, and then they get closer, and you absolutely destroy them with the grenade launcher and your Vector R4. So a very nice recon unit. You actually get some decent availability of them as well. You get 7, and you can bring them in the Caspian K cars even with a 20mm on those as well. So yeah, a very, very nice unit and very nice recon unit, 10 strength squad there. There's a Rover recon Jeep, pretty standard stuff, 95 km per hour speed. Then there's the SASF Sniper. These are very similar to the Senka and also the Canadian Recce in that they have an anti-material rifle with the 2 AP power. So they can technically take out vehicles over time, but I've never really seen much use for anti-material rifles in Wargame, since the squads that have them only have 2 strength. So if they get spotted, they're generally going to die. And I think these are pretty loud, so they do get spotted quite easily when they start to fire. Then there's a squad of trackers. These are your standard like 5-man cheap recon. So 15-point squad there, regular training with very good optics. And transports, again, not really much to look at here, just changes the availability based on what you bring them in some case not even. Then there's the final helicopter of the recon tab, at least, which is the XH-1 Alpha. Very cool little helicopter. Somebody on my stream, I think it was Lycus, said it looks like a cobra's had a baby. It's like a baby cobra. But either way, it has this turret on it, this 20mm turret. And 210 km/h speed isn't very fast, but it does have the recon availability to spot its own targets, and then can use the turret to acquire targets very fast and fire very fast. So if it like flies over something that it spots, it can easily turn around and shoot it very quickly, as opposed to something like a Gazelle with a 20mm on it, which would have to like turn and face it and then point in the right direction, whereas this can kind of fire like almost directly down. Right, anyway, that's all of the recon. Let's move on to the vehicles. So we've got the Ferret NTAC. This is, your standard Ferret. We've seen these before. 95 km/h speed, has 4 ATGMs, 2,100 meter range. Not fantastic. You can get Milan with a Ferret with a Milan on it, which is standard Milan launcher. But better than that, you get the Ratel ZT3A1. Now this is the Ratel hull, obviously, with a really nice Swift mounted ATGM, which has 70% accuracy, only 20 AP power, which is better than the Milan still. But one thing that's pretty cool about this is it has a salvo of 3 missiles. So what it does, it will fire 1 missile and it will either hit or miss, and then it will fire another one like immediately afterwards. It doesn't have to reload between fire. So it will fire 1, 2, and then 3, and then it reloads, and it takes 15 seconds to reload, and then it will have 3 more missiles it can fire. So this is actually a very nice vehicle for taking out medium armor and maybe transports. It does have 12 missiles, so yeah, it's pretty nice. 2,625 meter range, 105 km/h speed, so it can get out of there very quickly if it comes under fire. Yeah, a very versatile HGM launcher. Then there's the Rover 106, which has your pretty standard recoilless rifle Jeep. Yeah, it's nothing special really. Then we got the Ferret with also the recoilless rifle on it, but instead you've got armor now. And then there's the Ratel 90 FSV, which can be brought in on its own as opposed to a transport. And yeah, for 20 points, it's all right. It doesn't have a stabilizer though, so it has to stop and shoot. It's an interesting vehicle, but I don't think there's going to be much use of it. Moving on, we have the helicopter tab. So we got the Alouette K-Car. This is an Alouette with a 20mm strapped on the side, 210 km/h speed. Can fire on the move with the 5% accuracy there. So as you're kind of hovering around stuff, you can shoot at it with these as long as you've got the right side facing. So because it's kind of like a turret, but it's only able to fire on one side, like a lot of other helicopters in the same boat. But yeah, it's an okay little helicopter for 25 points. Next up though, we have the XTP-1 Beta, which is based on the Oryx, I believe. It's like something to do with, it's like an upgraded Puma, pretty much, where they added the ability to strap rocket pods and missiles to it. So it's got a 20mm. The 20mm is like underneath it, so a lot like the Cassiope, where you can like fire in almost all directions. And then it has the 68mm rockets, so these rocket pods on either side, and you've also in this case got 2 infrared missiles. It's got 260 km/h or 250 km/h speed with 6 strength. It's not the strongest helicopter in the world, but quite a nice payload. It does get better with the XTP-1 Beta 90, which comes with, instead of the air-to-air missiles, which are not great because you only get 2 of them at 45% accuracy and 4 HE, but now you get HGMs, and these HGMs are pretty good. So they're the ZT302 HGMs with a 70% accuracy and 26 AP power. They fire relatively quickly. I would say they're most comparable to something like a Toad 2. They're not quite, like a Hellfire, but they're reasonably quick. And 2,800 meter range is, reasonable. It keeps you out of range of like shorter infrared AA. So yeah, it's a pretty decent helicopter and can put out quite a lot of damage for the 90 points, in my opinion. Then there's the Ruhrvalk, which is kind of like the star of the show in the helicopter tab, but not particularly the most useful. It is an interesting helicopter. I just feel like it's a little bit overpriced. It's got a 20mm, which you can see strapped on the front here. This looks too big for the front of the helicopter. But then you've got those same HGMs, the ZT3 HGMs with the 70% accuracy, 26 AP power. So you've got that same sort of power. But then you've got 4 Mistral infrared missiles. Now, obviously, Mistrals are pretty good. So against other helicopters, it's probably not too bad. Like if you were to say come up against like an Mi-28 or something, you could then shoot it down with your Ruhrvalk quite nicely. But Mi-28s aren't that popular. If you came up, say, against Ka-52, you might have a good chance of sort of trading. And that's basically all it's really good for, is like it can trade with other expensive helicopters which also have infrared missiles, but other than that, it's just a A-to-GM boat, and it doesn't really do that any better than the XTP for 90 points. So yeah, I feel like this is a little bit overpriced, but either way, a very cool looking helicopter. I like how it looks for sure. It reminds me very much of the Chinese helicopter. It has like a very similar front to it. I can't remember the name of it though. Moving on, we have the air tab. Now the air tab is probably my favorite tab of the South Africans, just because I really like the models. I think the models are great, and I think that they're still upgrading the models as well. Obviously, this isn't the final product, so you know, you might see a few like weird shaders or whatever on some of these, but yeah, I think the models of all the aircraft and stuff in this game are amazing. So in this case, we got the Buccaneer S Mark 50, which has 4 anti-tank or anti-armor missiles. These are 35% accurate with 35% stabilizer. So just 35% accurate. With 30 AP power. Very strong 30 AP power. AP power. It's obviously the strongest you can get. But this only goes 600 km/h speed, and it doesn't have any ECM. So it's actually not a fantastic aircraft. But if you use it to kill an expensive tank, then it might be worth the trade. And since you have 4 missiles, it's very likely to get the kill as long as it doesn't get shot down before it gets all of its missiles off, which can happen. You can also bring it in at veteran, so you get the extra accuracy on top of your own accuracy, so it doesn't make the accuracy too bad. And obviously you've got like plenty of shots to make it happen. But I think the best use for the Buccaneer is when you know that you've taken out maybe a bit of AA, and then you can use this to kind of clean up the heavy to medium armor that's left over. Next up, we have the Carver. This is a prototype aircraft that I believe was never finished, but is a very cool looking aircraft. It has 30mm rounds in the front with some very nice missiles. So it's got 2 infrared missiles with 60% accuracy, 3,800 meters range versus aircraft. And then you've got 2 Darter radar missiles, which have 70% accuracy at range with 5 HE power. So very, very nice accuracy there. You're going to bring them at hardened as well, so they're going to get even more accurate. Then you got 50% ECM and 1,000 km/h speed. So a very, very fast ASF with a lot of firepower. So very, very nice indeed for taking out enemy ASFs and other attack planes. Then you got the Cheetah D. This is your seed option. It comes with 2 seed missiles which have 55% accuracy. Now, one thing that's very unique about these anti-radar missiles is that they are HE, but also they can be fire positioned. So they are fire and forget, and what you can do is fire position these on the ground to get that HE effect. So not only does this obviously kill light armored AA quite easily, but it also can kill other light armored units and infantry if you fire position them. So yeah, an interesting weapon system for sure. And then you've got 2 infrared Darter infrared missiles if you need them. It does have 30% ECM, 900 km/h speed. A very interesting seed option. Then you have the Sabre. I do like the Sabres in this game. I think they look really cool, but this one has an exceptional paint job. Very bright indeed. With the 68 6mm rocket pods. That's what it uses. 750km/h speed. Nothing terribly special here. I'm probably not going to see them all that often. There's the Impala Mark II. This has 68mm rocket pods as well. Slightly more rockets than the Sabre, and a slightly better main armament. Obviously not really going to be strafing all that often. It's the rockets that you buy these for, and yeah, this just has more of them. Then you got the Mirage 3CZ. This is pretty standard Mirage, cheap Mirage, with 2 infrared missiles and then the 1 SEMACT radar missile. So yeah, it's only got like the one there. So not a great air-to-air plane with no ECM. And you got the Mirage F1CZ. This is like your infrared exclusive variant. So one you'd use to take down helicopters or to spam into dogfights to shoot down enemy aircraft at close range. It has 45% extra 4 HE power missiles. But you can bring 4 in at veterans, so that does make these infrared missiles much better. And you also have 20% ECM, so it's not terrible. It does kind of survive a lot better than you'd expect it to. Finally, there is the Cheetah C, which is your other ASF, like your other like super ASF that you've got. This has a very similar loadout to the Carver, as you can see. The Carver has slightly better infrared missiles than the Cheetah C. But that is the only difference other than the ECM. The ECM there being slightly less on the Cheetah C, but of course this costs 15 points less than the Carver. Now, I think the extra ECM is probably worth it for the Carver, so I think the Carver is probably preferable. But this is a very cool looking aircraft for sure. I really like the texture on this one. I really, really do. How it looks like a little bit like used and so on. It's not so shiny. It's very, very cool. I like the way they've done it. Then there's the Mirage 3EZ. This is another air-to-ground AP missile. It's the same missile, I believe, that the Buccaneer uses, the AS-30, with the 35% actually, but you only get one of them. But in some cases, that might be a good thing. Since you've got 900km/h speed, you can just kind of like drop the missile and get out of there very quickly, whereas the Buccaneer will like continue to fly towards its target until it uses up all of its missiles. So in some ways, these might be better, especially you can get like 2 of them elite with some like really good veterancy would make these missiles a lot more accurate, and therefore you could maybe like side shot some super heavies with them. Because you'd only need to land like 1 shot in like the side armor to really kill like a super heavy. But then you got the Mirage F1AZ. This is a Mirage with cluster munitions. You get 6 AP power cluster bombs, and yeah, they're probably alongside your best anti-armor options, honestly, because of I feel like the air-to-ground AT is like these missiles are, you know, unreliable. Like, you can make them more reliable with the veterancy, but this is, I guess, more reliable overall. I guess the issue you're going to have here is if your unit, if your opponent's paying attention, then they'll move before like the clusters really do the maximum amount of damage they can do. Then there's the Cheetah E. This is a bomber. It has 227 kilogram bombs. It's got 8 of them. They've only got 10 HE power though. It does have 30% ECM, so which is actually relatively decent, and 900km/h speed, so quite quick. But the payload just seems very, very lackluster. I'm not a big fan of the payload. For the price, at least. Especially when you can get the Cheetah D2, which comes with the 2 Griffin SAL missiles, which are guided bombs with 15 HE power. Very, very strong aircraft with the 30 ECM again. And you get 2 of these at veteran as well. So yeah, super nice aircraft. Can be used for taking out armor as well. So really nice to have that there. Then we got the Vampire. The Vampire FB-52. Funny little aircraft, this one. 600km/h speed. 2 340 kilogram napalm bombs. So similar to the rover with the napalm launcher, I feel like it'd be good for those places where you have like isolated buildings that you want to like dislodge. But otherwise, definitely not going to see use. And finally, last but not least, we have the Canberra, which is a big bomber with 8 500 kilogram bombs. They each have 15 HE power. Now, obviously, this is a very slow aircraft. It doesn't have like any armor or anything. It's got no ECM, so it's going to go down pretty quick. But it's, you know, maybe a meme aircraft that you'll see out and about occasionally. I don't know. It's such a weird aircraft. I hate the way that the pilot's like off center in the fuselage there. That's really weird. But anyway, that is it. That is all of the units in the South African deck. And hopefully that's been a nice sort of show of all of the units that are available that they've kind of been talking about previously in the blogs. But yeah, just a quick overview there of all the units. Hope this has shown you guys what you wanted to see. Feel free to like go back and pause it at any point to check out specifics on all of the units. But I'm going to leave it here. I am going to make another video like sort of building or like looking over a couple of my decks, just so you guys can get an idea of how that's going to look. But for now, that's it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.